Hey there. This episode originally aired on my Patreon many months ago, so some of the information might be a little bit outdated by now. If you'd like to check out episodes as soon as they come out, you can join my $3 tier over there, or you can subscribe to check out full episodes coming here eventually. Either way, the choice is yours. Enjoy the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Pat's Creative Podcast, episode 16. Today, I am joined by a very special guest who you have probably seen at least 3 times now, I'd have to imagine, which is, of course, Talon Stradley, the original guest of Pat's Creative Podcast. Talon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. And, they probably have seen me more if they're watching the highlights instead of the full videos. But, if you want to see less instances of Talon, then you got to go support that Pat Nat on the Patreon,
This is a really weird sales pitch. I don't know if you're convincing anyone. I don't think you're convincing them to stay or to leave. It's just somewhere in the nebula.
Look, Patrick, I just think you have an opportunity. Patreon, PatNat, there's something there. You can have that one for free.
I will start my own Patreon competitor and call it Patreon. And I'm sure I will not get sued. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here for a very special episode today because we are talking about something that is very prominent in the art world today, and that is, of course, social media, which has kind of become arguably one of the most effective means of effective means of getting your art out there, arguably for a very long time. I mean, no other platform has been able to have as much reach as social media with regards to art sharing in the past. That said, because it has so much reach, you could argue that maybe the amount of competition makes it a little bit less effective or something like that. But what I'm trying to say is that social media is such a big part of sharing art in the art world today. And what we basically wanted to talk about was just dedicate an entire episode towards just talking about some of the benefits of social media for creators, as well as some of the negatives for social media for creators, because there certainly is a handful in both categories. And this is something we constantly touch on with pretty much every guest once or twice during an episode, is just some kind of comment on social media specifically or whatnot. And I always have to kind of cut myself short because I know I'm like, this is worthy of its own episode because there's just so much to talk about with it. And of course, we're talking specifically from the angle as creators and artists. There's definitely way more conversations that can be had just on the social aspects of it, or the, the business side of it and stuff like that. But we're mainly focused on just how it affects creators specifically. And yeah, that's kind of just the premise of the show. Also, this is going to be one of our special, very little highlight edition episodes. So if you're watching this on Patreon, then you are getting an even more exclusive podcast than usual, right? So there you go. If you're watching this like 6 months from now when it's on YouTube, good on you still. Wow, welcome. So we're talking about social media today. Did you have any points you kind of wanted to like jump off with, or?
Oh man, well, I kind of want to touch on just what you're mentioning as far as, kind of the opportunities that social media gives, as well as the hardships. And you just mentioned that what was it, that social media is one of the best ways to get your name out there, to advertise, to connect in a way that we never really have been able to before.
Right.
And honestly, I feel like that has just been such a great aspect of the modern age and of the internet, right? Because as an artist of any kind, right, your goal is to cultivate some kind of experience. And maybe that is through music or through YouTube or Twitch streams or theater plays or weird abstract performance art, right? Like that is just your goal, is to create something, some kind of experience. And the cool thing about social media is that allows us to integrate ourselves more into the daily lives of people, where before, in order to do something like that, at least on a mass scale, you would have to get on TV, get on the radio with a regular program, get on, write a column in the newspaper or something. And now you're able to just cultivate that. Right. And to, with my Instagram feed, I can have my brand, I can have my stuff. And if I just put out one album, sure, there's just, one album that's out, but I can also create this entire experience that engages them far beyond just whenever they're listening to it. And I think that alone is very awesome.
Yeah. And I the 3 examples you gave as to like what the outlets were previously with regards to radio, television, and newspaper feeds is like, social media really is the combination of all three of those, because it has auditory, visual, and reading inside of it, which is our like three primary sources of not just sharing art, but also just art in general, right? They usually rely on something visual or audio, or sometimes something typographic, right? And with social media, you just have the opportunity to promote all three in all kinds of combinations that didn't seem as possible before, right? And I think that's just something that's easy to overlook when you're specifically thinking about some of the more problematic things of social media, because I know I'm definitely guilty of going on long tangents about certain things of social media that I dislike or whatnot. And that's just because it's become so normalized to have such a powerful tool at our disposal to share our art out there. But really, if we want to take a step back and think about 2 decades ago, when none of this was normalized at all, this would seem like something that is absolutely wonderful for the art industry, you know? And
no, for sure. Yeah. And I think one of the greatest things too is the reach that it gives, right? Like talking about how that's impacted the art industry. Prior to this, if you were an independent artist looking to make something, you might make zines, you might make flyers, you might post them up around, you know, kind of do what you can. And it really doesn't matter how good your stuff is necessarily, like how good your art is. It matters how lucky you are, you know, if you can get in front of the right people. If you're making something that's engaging for people to want to put in the effort to seek you out and to be engaged with your stuff. And then now you can make good stuff, right? Like you can make your good music, you can make your good podcast, put it out there, and there's just so much reach that there's so much possibility for people to stumble onto it, you know? And then that's why I feel like now we start seeing people who, you know, are putting in the work, are making really solid stuff, are starting to, you know, get those followings. And even if it's just a humble little following, those followings mean a lot to the creators. And that's something that, you know, you probably would never have been able to get 20 years ago.
Right. It's similar to like, let's say like cafe bands, you know, bands that go and play in cafe. They might have some of those regulars that very much enjoy them, and it kind of creates a little bit of a cult following from that. That's kind of the equivalent to just having a small gathering online, where it's like, even though you understand you're not reaching absolutely every demographic with this, you still understand that there's individual people out there who like your content enough to watch it, just as I'm sure the people who played bands in the cafes felt that way similarly.
Definitely.
But yeah, it's just the potential because social media is designed to constantly feed people more content. Yeah. So it gives you, it puts odds in your favor that wasn't there before, right? And that's not to say that it's necessarily easy to just get seen, right? That's not exactly the case. But social media is designed to perpetually giving people more and more content, and naturally, even most accounts nowadays on social media don't default as private, right? It defaults as something public because they want to share your stuff around with other people.
Yeah, but it also, I mean, that gets into just the variance of the platforms, right? Like Facebook is something where it was essentially designed to have that exclusive feel, right? You can only see people's stuff if you're their friend. And while, you know, you can share some things, you know, there's different methods, but like as a whole, you think of that one as I am sharing this with people that I know and people that I have allowed to see it, which then contrasts to Twitter, you know, which is like very much like I am putting stuff out there for everybody to see, not even necessarily my followers.
Well, I think that's something I want to ask you, because I haven't used Facebook in a hot minute, but it has Facebook kind of shifted its focus more towards the publicizing of other people's stuff, because
Facebook is definitely geared more towards friends, family, specifically with the older crowd, right? And groups. Like, I think that if you are a young person who's using Facebook, you are probably using it in the group setting. So it just shifts the game a little bit, right? Like, I was in this social media marketing class where essentially what we did is we picked a new show that was coming out in the fall, right? And we started a fan page for it. So right there in the build up to the show, on the first episode of the show, all throughout the first half of the season, you know, like we're cultivating this, you know, following. And on Twitter, on Instagram, we were able to get super, you know, decent like followings, you know, thousands of followers and that kind of thing in this short period of time. And on Facebook, we were struggling just to get like above 10, right?
Interesting.
Because people are just not engaging with that in the same way, right? Like the idea of
Right.
liking a bunch of pages on Facebook and using that to curate your content isn't really there anymore,
Sure.
at least for the youth. But
Right.
again, groups is kind of where it's at. So while we didn't get a lot of people following our account necessarily, we did join a group dedicated to that show and posted our content there. And that content was getting, pretty decent engagement, for the size of the group and everything.
Sure.
Similarly, like podcasting, right? There's a lot of really good podcast Facebook groups, right? Or I'm in some different
Right.
like game development podcast groups, so there's places to advertise and to engage with people to get them to listen to your
Right.
stuff. But it's a very different vibe than,
Twitter.
like Twitter or Instagram, where you have your page and you're putting it onto the page. It's a little bit more of like the Reddit kind of vibe, where it is,
Right.
we have this group cultivated around this thing, and people probably aren't going to like it if you just go on there and you say, hey, I made this thing, go listen to it, because lots of people
Right.
spam that kind of stuff. So it's about showing off your work in a way that's not too pushy, but also stands out, and is definitely a very different environment than like the Twitter, Instagram.
It seems almost less about individuals posting, like as in
Right.
like less about like a freelance artist who's sharing their work, and more about communities of people, but like less, to a lesser extent than Reddit, I would say, right? Because Reddit seems like, I would say like Facebook almost seems in the middle between Reddit, Twitter, and Reddit and Twitter, basically, because like Reddit is all about community posting in a sense that you also all collectively decide what other people see, because it's all based on an upvote system, right? Where
sure, but I mean, Facebook works in the same way with the groups.
Oh, okay.
You know, like if something's liked more than that, like I get notifications for some groups that I'm in, and it just tells me like, yeah, like this post is really popular in the group, so if you want to really go through and read every single thing, you can, but you can also do that with Reddit, but that's why it's like the idea, the thing that is holding this together. And with both of those instances, I would actually say with Reddit leans a little bit more towards the individual profiles.
Interesting.
Because on Reddit, you can go to your profile, you can see all the posts that were made. You can post things directly to your profile on Reddit. So there's some very high profile people who have gone and kind of cultivate their own page and have, developed a significant following doing that. And I feel like that's a lot harder to do in the Facebook realm, just because the people that are on Facebook are not the kind of people that are looking to engage and discover and do these different things.
Well, I'm curious, with the Reddit thing, though, how often are the Reddit users themselves creators showing their work? Because
fairly often.
Fairly often? Okay. I guess I haven't really clicked on a user in Reddit. But
well, that's the thing, is that it, like I said, it's a very different vibe, right? Where Instagram, Twitter, I would say, is that you are cultivating your experience for your followers and that kind of thing. Reddit is much more reaching out, engaging, right? So a lot of the times, like on the, gaming subreddit, for example, you'll have people saying, hey, I've been working, 5 years on this and I'm so glad to show it. Here's the trailer for my new game. And they're not necessarily saying, hey, we just started the funding on this on Kickstarter, go do the Steam, but they just post a little clip. It's cool. The community generally does like that stuff, because it's like, this is a new game. That's a cool, novel concept. And then down in the comments, somebody's like, hey, where can I get this? And then of course the person's like, yeah, we have the Kickstarter, we have this. And you kind of have that natural kind of feeling.
Links in bio and stuff like that.
Yeah. But I will say it's definitely a different beast entirely. And most people don't, actively advertise on Facebook and Reddit. It's Instagram and Twitter is more where that kind of space is.
I think in a way, in some way people almost advertise on Reddit more than Twitter, just because I think Twitter becomes kind of like a platform to understanding the person behind what is being created through also advertising, right? Because they're people on Twitter very much like to share their thoughts on things, which is surprising, right?
Yeah.
But like they like to give their opinions out there, and you get to learn a little bit more about the person, while also, by the way, I upload a new video, and they throw it out. But with Reddit, because it's so community focused, I find that a lot of I find so many like cool pieces of art that are just posted to the right communities that I happen to be a part of. And it seems like a very effective way at advertising, because it's a community that I joined because I'm interested in that kind of content, right? As opposed to Twitter. Twitter's not organized by specific artists or Instagram, right? It's not like, I mean, I guess they technically have groups on Twitter as well, but it's not a very prominent thing, right? I don't think I followed a group.
But again, we're kind of talking about like those two separate things, right? Where like Twitter kind of like does have its communities, right? Like I have my Twitter account, Newton's Darkroom. it's a podcasting page. It follows a lot of podcasting people, you know, so you post and it's kind of going to this group and it just kind of has the chance to like shoot off elsewhere. But
Right.
again, like I think something that is different with those two platforms is that we're, you know, Reddit, Facebook, you're going to this group to see content about this kind of subject. With the other two, you're going to see stuff about the artist, right? Like you kind of mentioned, like what is going behind the scenes, where if I post something on Twitter, people are going to know, oh, you know, this is Newton's Darkroom. I can expect this kind of thing. I can, you know, like I follow this account because I like, you know, the podcast episodes that they promote, or I like the, you know, whatever, the little micro fictions
or
that
you
they
just
write.
want to figure out when they put stuff out. Like Twitter is so much about scheduling too, right? Of like, just this is where you can find me, this is when I go live and stuff like that. I think though, like the thing is though, I think the big difference between advertising on Twitter and advertising on Reddit is just Twitter is oriented around followers. It's around people who follow you specifically, while you can essentially get traction on whatever your project is without having any kind of following on Reddit, right?
Sure.
Just by posting it to the right community.
Yeah. The goal though is definitely to cultivate that following.
Bring people into you. Yeah.
You know, because it's like with like the
Reddit,
most success.
I think it's worse, but yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And by a long shot. And then, like I mentioned, like Reddit can also be, sorry, I'm bumping the microphone. Reddit can also be very, prone to sniffing out advertisements, right? Like things go really hit or miss. Like if it's like you're clearly posting that just to advertise your game, people aren't going to upvote that as much, you know, whereas, you know, if you have a record of posting good content on Twitter and on Instagram, so somebody follows your account, now whenever you make that announcement, they're going to see that because, you know, you've been posting great stuff up until then.
Well, and Reddit also has so many individual subreddit rules. Like the rules can shift between different places. Back in the day when I first got Reddit, I remember I advertised in all the wrong ways and definitely got a lot of like posts taken down and stuff, to where now I only really share stuff on there when I feel like it's something the community would actually benefit from listening to. Like I actually we had a bit of a highlight when I was interviewing Youngtown, where we were talking about Twitter and some of the effects Twitter might have on your mental health and whatnot. And I felt like it was a good conversation to at least listen to, maybe from the people on the Twitter subreddit, which feels it feels like I shouldn't be allowed. I feel like social media should stop each other from making accounts on each other's page, you know, like,
I know,
cut the competition out. But no, like, so, you know, I shared it there because I felt like it's a good discussion to have. But, you know, I always make sure I read over the rules very carefully, sometimes message the mod if I have a question, because it's like, it's really not, it's nobody on Reddit is looking for mass advertisers. You want content that's actually appealing to you. But I sometimes would feel relatively stuck. Like, I feel like you got to bring people to Twitter, but you can't really expand much on Twitter by itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's okay. So we'll kind of backtrack just a little bit from kind of these, like, you know, different social media things. And just kind of,
for the record, we don't need to stay on this forever. I don't mean to.
No, I know.
But like,
but I think that that's an important concept of talking about, you know, how do you expand your followers on something? And it's something everyone's trying to figure out. And the algorithms are always changing, and what people like are always changing. Because you're right, it is very hard to kind of organically grow that just by posting stuff. And which I know kind of sounds weird, but if I'm, you know, it doesn't matter how good my podcast is. If all I'm doing is posting my podcast episodes, nobody's going to follow me on Twitter. Nobody's going to share the stuff, you know? And so that's why Twitter is the one that I found the most success on. And a large part of that is because of how interactive it is. Right. So a huge way to, you know, gain your own followers and start making a name for yourself is by engaging with other people. Right. And that's why I really, really, really love the indie podcast community on Twitter, because there's so many different people, you know, retweeting new episodes, engaging with each other, planning crossover, saying, hey, our cast member that's in our show is also in this show. And of course your audience is going to be interested in that because they like your show enough that they followed you on Twitter. And so they're, you know, and you get this just massive cross pollination. And that's kind of how I found things to work out best. I'm sure as a YouTuber, you know, cross promotion is a very powerful tool.
But I think also it's worth noting that Twitter and podcasting are kind of like this, you know, like, the podcasting realm of networking seems to, from my very brief understanding, seems to be like fully on Twitter already, While with things like YouTube, it's kind of tough because you're promoting another social media on this social media, right? So I feel like that cross promotion circulating, like video recommendations or people shouting each other out for YouTube specifically, it happens a lot on that page, but maybe not as much on Twitter itself. I mean, retweets are definitely a thing, and most of my social media retention comes from retweets of other creators, but it's still like, you know, if you're right off the bat, I feel almost like you have to take shots at a different platform first before you kind of get a foot in with like Twitter or even YouTube specifically.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's just so dependent on the kind of
content you make, essentially.
Yeah. Like, for example, my music stuff always does better on Instagram. Like, for whatever reason, the Long Beach music scene, a lot of the LA stuff, that is like on Instagram, full blown. They have Twitters, they don't really use it. And so it's like, yeah, if I'm posting music stuff, like I'm going to be doing that more on Instagram. And that's where the engagement is the most.
Right.
And then again, like it's kind of the opposite for podcasting, right? Where it's like podcasting is really doesn't have as much of a presence on Instagram. It's there, but not nearly to the degree as it is on Twitter.
Yeah. Can I throw one proposal as to why that might be?
Oh, go for it.
Do you think it's because Instagram was built off of such a short-term content indulging? Because like even, you know, it starts with pictures, and then by the time they even introduce videos, they're at first only like, what, 5 seconds long or 15 seconds long or something like that. And then like, do you think...
I think that might play a part into it, but I think the biggest thing, at least with like podcasting specifically, is podcasting is an audio medium, right? Right. And that's just very awkward to post on Instagram.
Which is such a visual one.
Yeah. And it's not like music, where music is so artsy. You know, it's like music is like audio poem, you know, where it's like there's already such an emphasis on album art, on band photos, on merchandise, on live performances. And with a lot of podcasts, like the person's not even recording themselves doing the podcast necessarily. You know, it's like they're just doing the audio thing, editing it in Audacity and throwing it up there. And so that can be difficult to post. And what's more is you can't do links on Instagram. So that makes it a lot harder to say, like on Twitter, I can post a link to a specific episode and say, hey, this new episode just released. I can't really do that on Twitter without directing them through the bio, which is just kind of awkward. So I feel like that's
Instagram, but
Instagram. And so I think that's why with Instagram, and it works so well with music, with I feel like YouTube is another good example, you know, because it's like, you have your YouTube video and you take a 1 minute clip and you post that on Instagram. Right. And it just, those ecosystems are a lot more cohesive than, you know, podcasting. Like I always struggle to figure out how am I going to advertise my podcast on Instagram without it just being an audio waveform against my podcast cover?
It's always been a struggle for podcasters to just try to make podcasts remotely visually interesting, when the reality is we're sitting in front of a microphone like the entire time. And it's, you know, I find that kind of a cool aesthetic. I like seeing you taking pictures of you and your microphone saying like, get yourself a microphone the way it looks at you or something like that. Right. I like that as like aesthetic or whatnot, but in like the world of Instagram, where everything is so tone based and has theming and just like artsy like that, I feel like it's harder to really showcase the visually artsy side of podcasting.
Kinda. I mean, I think I do agree. It is a challenge, but I think that it just touches on something a little bit more that is very prevalent in all of, you know, this stuff, which is branding, right? It's you need to have cohesive branding. You need to have a plan. Right. I really like my Instagram. Like I'm really proud of how it's kind of come together. The Newton's Darkroom one has kind of been all over the place, just because Newton's Darkroom has been all over the place. But if you look at some of the other shows, like you know, The Whole Way Through or Cochlea, and those I feel like had very nice cohesive branding. You know, I sat down, I picked my fonts, I picked my colors, I bought like, you know, $20 worth of stock photos of seashells, and then there you go. Like there's my Cochlea branding, and it makes it look cohesive. It makes it look interesting. It stands out compared to a lot of the other like podcasting stuff that I see. And so I feel like that stuff is very important. The problem is that it just takes so much time, right? It's just you do have to set time aside to plan it. You do have to set time aside to make these and to schedule out all of your posts and that kind of thing. But if you put in that work, you know, it's going to look good. And really that's what YouTubers, that's what, you know, music people are already doing. They're used to having to kind of plan that stuff. But again, like even just looking where the audiences are, right? It's like, it doesn't matter how good of Instagram content you have for your podcast, because the podcasting audience is largely on Twitter. You know, like you're probably going to get more listeners from dedicating your time to Twitter than you would be from dedicating your time to Instagram.
Right. I think also, you know, with Instagram, when you like, because podcasts, you know, ideally you share clips of it, right? Like that's kind of like the ultimate ideal. Because
or a trailer or something, some kind of
audio.
audio.
Right. But you know, Instagram, when you're watching, it's in the middle of a already continuous scroll, right? Like when you're watching things, like your finger hasn't even left the screen yet. It's ready to skip you whenever. And I feel like it's hard to like have something as long term as a podcast.
Yeah.
Like, and then just take some audio snippet while it's.
And even like, because it just loops, right? And you can't pick a spot.
Oh my
so
gosh,
if you miss it, then you have to look back through, or maybe you have to click on the audio. And any text that you want to add, because people don't really look at the descriptions, right? They're not going to be like, oh, what's this? So it visually has to be interesting. It visually has to say, this is the show, this is the episode, listen to the rest of it.
Yeah.
While also letting the person know there is audio going on, please turn on your sound.
Yeah.
You know, so there's just so many barriers to like effectively showing pure audio on Instagram.
Like the Instagram even essentially hides the descriptions. You know, it shows like a very little sliver of line and then a more, but you click that more, what you're going to see is a big block of hashtags, because that's also where you got to put in your tags and stuff like that.
Yeah, nobody
so
wants to look down there.
Yeah,
you know?
and why should they? I mean, you can't blame them.
Yeah.
But you know, there is one social media town that we've been avoiding like this entire time, which is of course the most hippest kid on the block right now. That is TikTok, which honestly, TikTok is still so new that it's hard to like fully explain what its weaknesses and strengths are, right? Because now it's just popping off. But
I mean, it has been going strong for some time now, and it's also just it's Vine, right? Like it is very much that same energy of, it is short form videos that are being posted. If Vine had stayed around for another couple of years, like that's what it would have looked like. It might be a little bit different because of the tools it gave, right? Like TikTok stemmed out of like Musical.ly and that kind of thing, and so it you know, whenever you look at the dances and that kind of thing, like that's, I believe, because it was originally coming from this more musical app.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of great content on there. There's still the comedy stuff. There's still this, and it's just those short form, you know, vertical videos.
But like, you know, if you're using it as like I think where it gets difficult to decide like how, like where its strengths are and weaknesses are, is when you're promoting content from another page specifically. Like if you are, because like if you have a YouTube channel or something and you post clips from your YouTube channel on TikTok or whatnot, like it's kind of bizarre because it also has the same thing where it's like you can't really post links, and you have to rely on people to go to your bio, which not everybody does. TikTok, when the video's done, it automatically goes to the next one, right? Like, or does it loop? I don't know. I'm not too familiar with it.
Yeah, I don't have a TikTok.
Okay. Okay, I made one just recently because I was like, I might as well give this a shot, and I've been posting like really small segments. So if you guys want clips that are even smaller than the highlights, I don't know what's wrong with you, but if you want that, you can go to TikTok, because I apparently upload there every once in a while now. But it is kind of interesting because because it's so short and it just shoves it in people's face, like the retention it gets is so different from like YouTube or Twitter or something, where you know, Twitter registers like a video of your view when it autoplays when you're scrolling or whatnot. So if you count those views, it might not feel like fully you know, like actual views or whatnot. While with YouTube, it's more you have to specifically commit by clicking, loading a whole nother page before you actually watch it, and that view suddenly seems like has more weight to it. With TikTok, I just don't know what extent like those views actually mean something, because it's like they're watching 7-second clip, but like does it register like the full thing? And that's why it's like it's hard to fully digest it right now, because it's like it's I don't know, like there's not a ton of experts on TikTok right now, but I mean maybe there is. I don't know. I'm not talking to them, but you know.
Yeah, I mean there definitely is. I think like a lot of platforms, it like essentially with a lot of these platforms, it's very easy to think, I am going to use this to promote my show. I am going to post every time I have a new episode and tell people to listen to this and tell people to subscribe on Patreon and all that kind of stuff. But really what you're doing is it needs to be treated a little bit more like traditional TV, right? Is like 90% of your content should be just fun, engaging stuff that your audience likes. And then you slip in your stuff, you know? So if you're making TikTok, and I think TikTok is a great example of that, right? Like 90% of your TikToks should be, you know, whatever goofy stuff. If I'm, you know, made a TikTok for Newton's Darkroom, maybe I would make short 15-second sketches that, you know, have the same vibe as I, you know, with lots of analog equipment and crazy whimsical stuff, you gotta, you know, whatever. And
embrace the platform you're on, basically.
Yeah. And it's like this with everything, right? Like if you want to incorporate, nobody wants to see an ad every single day. But if you are creating stuff that is engaging, that is interesting, that is fun, even if it's not, you know, related to your topic even, right? Like, you know, Rain runs a social media account for a like home goods online store. And recently, you know, they made a post about like the 5 best gym office pranks, right? And so it's like, that's not something that is one, you know, they're not directly tying that to a thing, but they're engaging posts. The art's good, it looks good, and then people are sticking around for that. And then all of a sudden you're slipping in the, hey, we also have this teapot available, or, you know, whatever it might be on that day.
You got to treat it like just another form of content, just like when you upload your own content. Once you're uploading on your regular page, you don't see it as an advertisement because it's just you uploading your content, right? And you kind of got to treat it the same way, where it's just, this is this form of content or whatnot. Which is why for the time being, for my TikTok, I just find an interesting bit and like the small highlight and just let it run. I don't even usually mention much else other than that. But, you know, maybe someone will come by and think, hey, where do you find this or whatnot? But yeah, it is an interesting beast for sure, because it's very bizarre because, like you said, it is very similar to Vine, but Vine was something that was almost cut short before its popularity had time to really flourish. You know, it got canned relatively quickly. But it might have been partially responsible for this rise in like even vertical video viewing, which has become so prominent today. You know, Snapchat, pretty much everything is vertical on there, and now TikTok or whatnot. It makes you wonder, like, if just everything smartphone related is going to be vertical at some point, because there's clearly more of an emphasis on, like, you know, it's I don't want to get too much into the filmmaking part, but, you know, like landscape shots are to show landscape, obviously, but if you take something vertical, suddenly you can show like a person a lot easier in a way, right? And it's like that has kind of taken the focus on a lot of these social medias, is showing the people anyway, because
yeah, I mean, the big thing I think is like the barrier to entry, right? Is if I am taking a video of myself, it is a lot clunkier and a lot harder to hold it like this than it is like this. You know, like the phones are designed to be held like this. And so if I'm going and making a TikTok, you know, I'm just by myself, I'm a guy, I'm just going to be doing this. You know, I'm not going to be paying someone to hold it and, you know, do the landscape stuff. And so I think that it's a combination of
ease of access.
Yeah, like people naturally, if you're creating content, you're going to be creating it in this way. And simultaneously, if I am watching this content, it happens so fast. You know, like you said with Instagram, your finger never leaves the screen, you know, and I don't text like this. I don't hold my phone like this unless I'm watching Netflix. And so, you know, that just also scroll through.
Right. You don't scroll horizontally either. Like on no app are you ever scrolling horizontally.
Well, Safari, you know, turn it sideways, but
yeah, but like
they're meant to be held vertical, you know?
Yeah. It's just kind of interesting how those seeds got planted and suddenly it's now a legitimate new form. Cause like it's so bizarre to me seeing YouTube ads that are by default vertical. In my head, I'm like,
that is one of my biggest pet peeves. And I don't mind it. I understand it. I get it. For me, I hate that it doesn't automatically go to landscape after the fact. So I'll get a vertical ad. I'll press the full screen button because I'm watching this video full screen. I skip it, and then I get this like small video, and I have to go out of full screen and back into it. Like automatically change. But
every once in a while we'll have these minor like mechanical pet peeves or whatnot. Mine was Instagram freaking like having no start and end. It just plays when it wants to and stuff like that. That's my Instagram pet peeve. Well, okay, so we've talked a lot about actual networking and promoting content and stuff like that, but we really also need to get into some of the more less than fortunate aspects of social media and social media possibly addiction and just promoting work on there. I think maybe a good entry point would be to take a look at specifically how many people use social media and kind of first enter through like the competition side, because social media is the place to be sharing work. There is so much competition for people you don't even want to be competing with, right?
Yeah.
There's just tons of other content that other people could be consuming, and you have to somehow convince them to watch yours over theirs. And not only is there competition in what people see, but even in ranking. I'm sorry, my headphone's buzzing. I dropped my headphone my headphones like 5 times in a row, and I think I might need a new pair now. But you know, it's we have a numeric ranking as to which post is specifically doing better, which just raises the competition level between other people, right? Whether it's like counts, follower counts, retweets, comments, like it's all, we can't help but feel the fact that we even acknowledge those numbers shows that we can't help but feel some sort of competition between what other people's numbers get, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is just it has to be your outlook, you know? Because on one hand, I do get what you're saying. Like there can be that kind of, oh, they have more views than me, they have more likes than me. But at the same time, you know, was it the famous saying or whatever, you know, a rising tide raises all the ships. And that's one thing that I've really seen the indie podcast stuff, right? Is it's not about who has more followers, who has more this, because all of those people are going to go over there eventually. You know, it's like if you are, you know, liking other people's stuff and sharing other people's stuff, and they get more popular, whenever they mention your show, that they like your show, you know, more people are going to come that way. And I feel like it's kind of similar, you know, with most platforms. Like, sure, there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of content out there, but if you just put in that little bit of work to get beyond that like bottom tier, you know, of just like people literally just like recording something on their phone and then, you know, uploading an hour video to YouTube, then you're going to start standing out and you're going to get that stuff. And there is going to be that cross pollination, even though there's so much competition.
And that's why I wanted to clarify, even competition that doesn't feel like competition, right? Because even if you don't see yourself as competing with another person and you're not trying to get higher numbers than them specifically, there's always going to be a hidden sense of competition because of our fellow acknowledgement of each other's progress. And when you're talking about this bar that you have to get over, like you definitely do, but the competition comes in when everybody is raising that bar, the bar just gets higher and higher and higher, right? And you can't necessarily stop that level of competition, for lack of a better word, right? But like you said with the indie, like I have no reason to believe that any of the other indie podcasts are thinking like, Talon's getting more likes than me, doggone it, like I gotta find a way to outdo him, right? I mean, I'm sure that's not the case, you know. I don't think it's
aggressively the case, but I do think that motivation can be good. And I know that people feel that, right? Like that's where like a lot of that imposter syndrome feels like that's something that I've really struggled with this last year. Is I had a lot of different podcasts, you know, of varying lengths and success and that kind of thing. And this last year, I've really had to step back from that just because of, you know, where I'm at in my life. I have a full-time job now. I moved, COVID, right? Like there's just so much going on that have impacted that. And then at the same time, I can look at the people who were starting their podcast around the same time as me, and they're on their, you know, 2nd, 3rd, 4th season. They're winning more Audioverse awards. They have like 3 or 4 shows that are regularly putting stuff out. And I just kind of like wasn't able to get there. And so on one hand, it is very easy to look at that and kind of get that competition. But even in that circumstance, you know, if you're in a good community and if the people are so nice, like people are patient, people are excited to hear stuff from you. And those people that, you know, might have, you know, gotten a lucky break or might have surpassed you or whatever, like they're still your peers, you know, there's still a place for you there. And, you know, see how you can help them out. You know, they'll give you shout outs whenever you're starting to, you know, do stuff again. Like it's this ecosystem, you know, and it's like, be a good part, put stuff out there and, you know, try your best to support people, and it's going to help everybody, including yourself, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it definitely helps the consumer for sure. If that bar keeps getting raised, you know, that's only better for the people watching and the industry as a whole.
There was a bunch of podcasts, like especially before the pandemic in the area. There was 2 specifically, the Psychic Wave and then Bundy, the podcast, that interviewed local musicians and stuff. And it was really cool kind of seeing the arms race between the 2 of them, because they're both interviewing a lot of the same clientele. They have a lot of the same listeners. They cross promoted each other a lot, but all of a sudden you have one who, you know, gets a second camera, and then it's like, okay, well now I need a second camera to get those 2 things. And this one does a live performance, and then it's like, oh, well now I need to do live performances. And then, you know, and and the quality of those two things really went through the roofs. Like those are two
Sure.
really, really killer productions.
Yeah.
That gave a lot of local bands a great platform, you know,
Right.
and that's because of that. And they'll be the first to tell you, they're like, yeah, it's because of that competition, because we wanted to, you know, one up them and meet
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Right.
And I also know that those two are like, you know, great friends and that kind of thing, you know, so.
Sure. Well, and competition between friends is oh so much better than competition between strangers, right?
Yeah.
If you understand that you both have a common goal, and while at the same time wishing the best for the other person, then it's like naturally you guys are both gonna rock it up at the same pace.
Yeah.
But you know, it's still like there's a lot of other creators though who are first entering and ultimately feel very intimidated by all this, right? Because it takes a lot to get a healthy outlook on this whole kind of situation of like, I'm a tiny fish with much bigger fish all around me, right? Because you know, and one thing I find all the time on YouTube, because I look for a lot of small creators to collaborate with through whatever methods I can find, and the amount of times I have found a bunch of small channels with really good work on their channels but stopped uploading like 2 years ago or something like that, it's just like, it's just, I can't help but imagine that you know, all of this connectivity between everything can just be so daunting and overwhelming on newer creators, right?
Yeah, I think,
And I'm not presenting it as like just a problem, right? Like
No,
it's just you know, I think something worth acknowledging, right?
I think something that's a little bit like adjacent to that I think is a little bit like sad just regarding like all this stuff is less of towards new creators and more of towards old creators. Like you said, like if you have someone who stopped posting something, you know, 2 years ago, and that's just where their profile ends, like, are you going to watch any of the videos from that page?
I mean, if I'm specifically looking to collaborate, probably not. Well, I mean, I would have to know, if I know that their content's good, it means I watched it. But like, you know,
Sure. But like even
yeah.
Oh yeah, but I know, like for me, like I'll be going on a YouTube channel and I'll see, oh, they haven't posted in 2 years, and yeah, there might be a series or something that I'm looking at, but I'm not diving into that back catalog. I'm not looking to develop a relationship. You know, I'm not looking to put this person, you know, into my regular watching. And I think that kind of sucks because there is a lot of great content out there, and it just, the whole system really favors, like, if you are not actively putting out stuff, people aren't going to listen to it. You know, if I'm actively putting out, if I'm putting out a Newton's Darkroom episode every single month, you know, I get, you know, 100 downloads every single time or something like that. And, you know, I stopped, you know, I haven't put out an episode since January. I had a large break during, you know, COVID and that kind of thing. And, you know, I'm getting maybe like 2 or 3 listens a month, you know, just, you know, throughout the entire podcast, you know, and, yeah, and I get it, because like you're wanting the new stuff that people are posting, they're engaging, right? Social media is about engaging and actively seeking out listeners, right?
And that's what I was gonna say. Like that also applies to things like Twitter and Instagram, where even if that's not where your main source of content is, you have to be constantly posting on those as well, because that continues this engagement level and also makes whatever systems happy to promote your stuff to other people and whatnot.
Like nobody is looking at my Newton's Darkroom Instagram account right now because I haven't posted on there since like a year ago, you know? So it's like, it's not even like the work that I put into that is necessarily continuing to get me new listeners. You know, it's not like, it's not like some other things, you know, it's like, it's there. And if you're not actively doing it, then all of it's going to fall to the wayside.
Well, and especially nowadays on YouTube specifically, I mean, that's just where most of my knowledge comes from, right? So I just keep bringing it back to there. But like, you know, back like a long time, there's a lot of older creators nowadays who used to be very much flourishing in popularity back then, who have since just lost a lot of that traction to the point where they just stop uploading, right? But like, you know, back then when there was less videos being uploaded, it was a lot easier to stumble across older videos. While nowadays you have to really try to actually find older videos, because newer stuff is constantly coming out, especially if you're talking about a specific movie or a specific game. Back then there was 1 or 2 really good videos done on a specific movie at a given time. Nowadays every movie's been talked about, every game's been talked about, and they all have really well done video essays on them. And it's just kind of burying this old content. It's kind of this weird new era of this content is in the now. You listening to the now. The chances of you even coming back to this 2 days old in your feed is unlikely, right? So it's this bizarre shift because it certainly didn't used to be that way. You know, back when YouTube was first kind of starting, we were starved for more content to the point where we were going back and watching older people's stuff. But now the system wants you to upload every day, where there's not much incentive for people to go back and watch a video from a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
And it's this bizarre shift, right? But you know, I'd like to believe that art's not confined to whatever formalities you have to abide by, right?
Yeah.
Your art you can still be artistic regardless of the changes that happen in the formula. I don't do video essays stuff anymore. I don't even really attempt it. So I've saw the current state of the platform, and I was like, how can I still talk about what I want to talk about in a format that's digestible for the platform? And maybe I found it, maybe I didn't. I don't know. I just pretend to know things I don't actually know. But still, it's like, you know, just to give kind of a more positive spin on this, because the platforms are always changing, you don't have to feel like abiding by these changes is a bad thing. Like, you don't have to feel like you're taking a knee or you're compromising your artistic integrity. It definitely doesn't have to be that way, you know. It's just important to recognize that your conceptual idea of what your art is, it's bigger than just whatever formal constraints of, like, maybe I used to be able to upload 2-minute videos, now I have to upload 10-minute videos. It's like, well, yeah, but your art's still there. Like, you're still, that's just the formality. It's just the vehicle that's being transferred. Every once in a while, you change the vehicle,
that's the thing, is that art is made from these restrictions, right? And these challenges, and there's also no like direct bar for success for art, right? Like, that's up to you. Like, if you want to make something and put it out there just for yourself and it gets a couple listeners, that's awesome. If your goal is to garner a large amount of listeners, then you're going to have to take a different approach than if your goal is just to, you know, have fun and do whatever, you know. And there's some great stuff that it's like, it sucks that you're not able to post those 2-minute videos anymore, but also, like, that's probably pushed you in some different directions. And you definitely made some videos that you wouldn't have ever made, you know, in the old format, you know. So it's just all these challenges. It's creatively stimulating. It keeps you on your toes. And so, you know, if that's what you want to do, then go for it. You'll see success.
I mean, art's never stagnant. It's never stays in the same place, and you don't want it to be. If art was stagnant, boy, we'd have a lot less artists. There'd be a lot less people interested in what we're watching. There has to be some level of change. It's just a matter of keeping your spirit in whatever you do next, in whatever vehicle you take to transfer over stuff. Even if that means YouTube goes down and suddenly we're all on TikTok, by golly, I gotta find a way to do it.
That's the reverse Vine right there, where all the Vine stars went over to YouTube.
Oh yeah. The great YouTube refugee march of TikTok would be absolutely fascinating. Oh my gosh, seeing how some people adjust to that would be so funny to watch. Also, probably sad and happy, maybe. I don't know. It'd be an emotional ride. But yeah, like, you know, the platform's always changing, and it's important to not feel like you have to hold on to these specific formal elements. This specific, I make 10-minute videos and I'm not going to compromise that. It's like, you don't have to hold on to those principles or whatnot. But yeah, so that's kind of a more positive spin on just the level of changing that's always happening in art and these platforms, and trying to keep up with it. One thing we could also kind of go into is just, you know, social media has effects on mental health too, right? Where it's because art seems to be, the social media distribution of art has an interesting caveat of being mixed in with also people just essentially voicing their concerns or just sharing their opinions on certain things. Like, you can't really separate art from that other nebula of just, these are my thoughts, like, what do you think? At least in the realm of social media, because it's all about that personal aspect,
right?
Whether it's on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, it's always like, I'm having trouble like formulating the words for this, right?
Well, you have like personal accounts and you have business accounts, you know. It's like you have somebody who is, you know, live tweeting their view of The Bachelor because, you know, they're bored and they want to shout it out into the void, alongside, like, you know, the Facebook, Twitter account, alongside, you know, this indie podcast that's trying to get followings.
Right. I guess what I mean to say is, just with everything that maybe trends or gets retweeted and stuff like that, as a creator, no matter how hard you help it, you can't entirely be on this realm of escapism of just purely content entering your feed, right?
Yeah.
You will always have outside opinions on maybe matters that you don't care about, or matters you do care about but actually feel the opposite on, right? And vice versa. So it's like you almost can't avoid this other side of social media that exists, which is, I guess, the social aspect of it. And as creators, your art is going to be intertwined with that in some capacity. Like, it's unavoidable, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that could be tricky for a lot of creators, because it's not only could it be on matters that don't involve them, sometimes it just takes one different retweet or one quote to have all that attention go towards you as well, where it's like people who you weren't originally planning on engaging with are suddenly engaging with your content on a more social level. And by social, I mean either discourse or sometimes very elaborate criticism or something like that, right? And it's not all bad stuff. It just might not be stuff that's easy to adjust to. And I think that could be like one of the difficulties of the whole thing, right?
Yeah, like you're definitely putting yourself out there for a lot of different, a lot of different routes. Like if I go, 30 years ago and do stand up in a, in a bar somewhere, that's like 20, 30 people tops that are gonna, hear that. And then now it's like, yeah, I can, go and do this podcast right now. And, sure, like that might just go out to 20 or 30 people like in the bar, but it also has the potential to go out to everyone, and it also sticks around forever, so it can be tricky. I think that it does hold people to a higher standard though. I think a lot of people obviously step up to that challenge, and instead of backing away and saying, well, I'm just not going to create stuff, I'm just not going to say stuff, they instead think, long and hard about the kind of stuff that they want to say, at least hopefully, at least in the realm of like creative stuff, right? Like if I'm just sending out a tweet, that's a little bit of a different vibe than if I am like going and recording a whole podcast or something. And I think that really just helps to hold people to a higher standard. I think that we're kind of at a time right now where people are just thinking more critically about the kinds of things that they are saying and doing. In the similar way that like I was watching this kid show, right? It's called Ask the Storybots. And that's a fantastic show. If you have a, 5-year-old in your life, watch the show because it's great. But
if you're ever babysitting, you know exactly what show to put on.
It's great. It's really great. But they have an episode where they talk about space, and where they talk about gravity specifically. And they literally talk about like the space-time fabric, right? And like all of this kind of stuff that I would not have seen in a TV show, whenever I was growing up, 10, 15 years ago or whatever, and so as we learn more and as that knowledge just becomes more common knowledge, then that allows us to discuss more complicated issues. 15 years ago, the kids show would be saying gravity pulls stuff together. And then now they're actually talking about the space time because people understand how gravity works, And I feel like it's the similar thing with just that critical thinking with those social things where, the creators, I hope, are making stuff that is more purposeful, and it's just being more aware of the kinds of things that they say and the kind of impacts that can have.
And I think you really hit the nail on the head or coffin or something. I don't know. I'm a little tired, not gonna lie. But I think you were right on the dime when you were talking about just having more purpose in what you say and thinking about more of what you craft, because that's not where social media was birthed. Social media was birthed off of things you release that you don't think about or whatnot. But it's kind of evolving to a place right now where it needs more thought being put into whatever you're presenting, because it has such a wide reach. Well, that definitely wasn't the case before. Facebook, which was one of the first popular, if not the first popular social network, right? I mean, I think technically MySpace.
MySpace for sure, but Facebook is also like a totally different beast now. Facebook clearly won and excelled way further than
there's no competition there. But it's back when Facebook was made, as we mentioned earlier, it was a lot more friend oriented. It didn't really even have an outlet for expanding beyond friends and family that you already know. While now it has many venues for that. So naturally, when everything's being promoted on other people's page, like it's just interesting to think about how when I log on Twitter and I just look at my feed of people I follow through retweets and sometimes Twitter promoting liked tweets or commented stuff and whatnot, I am seeing a very large number of people that I never followed, that I never said, I consent to seeing what you want to have to say or whatnot, right? And I'm not presenting this as necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying that's how the formula of it works. And when that's the atmosphere, it becomes ever more important to at least think fully about what you're about to say on a social media, because
Yeah.
which yeah, and then as you mentioned, that's ultimately a good thing, is that we want to be thinking more about what we say when we're presenting to a broader audience, which a lot of us want to. A lot of us want that attention of presenting to broader people. However, it is kind of just in a rough spot right now, where there's a lot of smaller people who feel almost congested by like different thoughts going around, stuff that they didn't need to like subscribe to necessarily, right?
Yeah, I think that yes, like there is a lot, and if you are just coming into that, it can be very daunting to feel like there's certain topics that you can't talk about, or certain things that you can't say, or characters that you can't write, or whatever.
Right.
I think that it as I mentioned, I think it's just important to push people to understand that, right? And if you're coming into a space and you're not sure what the etiquette is or what the things are, like, definitely take some time to listen, which you should be doing already if you're a content creator. Like, if you're entering a social media platform in order to find like success in larger listeners or larger viewership, then you should understand, hey, what is the etiquette here? What do these people talk about? What are their likes, dislikes? You know, what do they think about these topics? And so take that time to listen, observe, talk to people who have a different experience than you, right? Like, that's huge. It's like you and me, we grew up together. We shared a backyard together. Like,
it's true.
We can have very similar issues. I kind of know where you stand, you know, but if I really want to get an idea of, you know, what YouTube has to bring, I'm going to want to reach out to someone who's not, you know, sitting with headphones on and glasses and, you know, little.
We need to talk to less glasses crowd. Okay. Their thoughts and opinions, they're way too much alike.
Literally everybody in my friend group has glasses. Literally every.
You know, am I crazy in saying that we need glasses more often now than when we were kids? Am I crazy? I feel like I see more people with glasses nowadays, and I don't know if that's because of all these computer and phone screens, but
I wonder.
Because I only needed glasses after, like, I realized that my eyes were hurting from looking at a computer screen for so long. And that was like in 2016.
I mean, I've always been worried because we're the first generation that is really like grew up with nonstop screens.
Yeah.
Right. Like, sure, past people have had like TVs and stuff, but like, I'm looking, my phone, you know, is open 6 hours a day. It tells me at the end of every single week. And that's not even including my computer that I sit in front of all day for work. That's not even including, you know, the video games that I play, you know, so it's like, I really spend a majority of my day looking at
Doesn't
screens.
Include the timer on the microwave you look at.
No, not at all. Yeah. And so I would be curious if that is part of the reason. I will say though, that I think glasses look great. I think like 95% of people look better with glasses. And so maybe there is just like, people recognizing that as well.
Right. And it's not that you have to think that, right? Like, you actually think that, right?
No, I do.
Okay. Just to backtrack a little bit before we got on the weird glasses talk. I definitely agree with what you're saying. With just it needs to become more known, because as you did mention in the glasses talk, we are the first generation to grow up with this kind of stuff, and we're kind of learning this all together. Yeah. But you know, I think drawing attention to these issues and just fully letting people understand like exactly what's at stake with regards to your mental health and what you say and what you share. It's raising that level of awareness seems to be the only way to combat that kind of situation, because we can't change the way the systems work. We can't backtrack technologically wise and like suddenly cut out social media. We can't just remove it from existence, right? Like I definitely don't have anything against people who decide not to use social media. I'm like, more power to you. You're doing what I'm not able to do, right? I talk bad about Twitter all the time, and I'm still using it to post almost once a day. So it's like, I'm well aware though that this is the time that I live in. I wasn't born decades earlier. I was born in this time, and I can't just pretend to not be born in that, right? Yeah. I don't really want to live in a different age. I'd rather live in this age and try to adjust to it. But I think one of the ways we can adjust to it is just by acknowledging, hey, there might be some issues here if we're not careful, right? Yeah. And I think that's just the important message to constantly get across, because by the time people stop listening to this podcast or whatnot, new people will come in and they will have never heard that kind of talk, right? And it's just like that across the board. So it constantly needs to be brought back to people's attention that social media is to be handled with care and delicacy,
Yeah.
like a baby. Don't shake social media. You want to put that right back to in its crib with the blanket.
Yeah.
And I think on the crib and blanket talk, that might be a good place to kind of wrap it up.
I'm all
and
for
that's
that.
not just because we're both relatively tired. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you guys have any other like discussion points you want to go further in the comments, feel free to do so on the Patreon comments or on the YouTube comments, wherever you're watching this. And of course, thank you so much for supporting me. And if you'd like to check out clips from other podcasts, you can do so by subscribing to the Pat Nat YouTube channel and checking out those clips. And of course, you can support me on Patreon to catch episodes when they come out much earlier than they went on YouTube. Talon Stradley from Newton's Darkroom, would you care to plug anything you'd like and explain where people can find you?
Yeah. So, one, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter at Newton's Darkroom. Not as we mentioned earlier, I'm kind of on in between projects right now, but I do have some exciting stuff coming up in the near future. So, you can expect to see a lot more activity. Honestly, by the time this video is out, go, check it out, listen to it. I'm sure there'll be
on
stuff
YouTube
there.
On YouTube,
on
YouTube,
YouTube,
yeah. Then you should have at least 6 months worth of content. So
yeah, exactly. And then if you want to see me start a social media account from scratch, I as if that's something new. But
that's our favorite pastime.
Yeah, just starting. I mean, honestly, for me it is. That's a real problem that I have, is I just start too many. But I have one that I started recently. It's called talons.space. That is both a URL and a like Instagram and Twitter handle. I plan
that must be so satisfying.
It is. Yeah, it was really cheap too. But check that out. talons.space. That's where I'm going to be posting a lot more of my like sound design, a lot of my technical stuff, demo reels, anything like that, as opposed to the more creative stuff that Newton's Darkroom has. So I've been working on like redoing like some League of Legends character sound design. I have been experimenting with recording audio in Unity. I might start streaming some on that platform. So that's going to be a little bit more of my like oddball, audio technical stuff and demo.
Sure.
So go check that out. The branding is very, very fun. And I really like it because, I like all that kind of stuff. So go check that out and get it off the ground.
I love that one of your selling points is that the branding is really, really fun, because that's something that I feel too, when I'm making this stuff. It's like, I want to tell them that the branding's really, really fun, because it really is. But it's like,
we put a lot of work into it.
Yeah,
I put more work into the branding so far than I have about the actual content that's on there.
And that seems to be the way it goes usually.
Yeah. I mean, you're starting it out. You got to go. Have you checked out yet?
No, I didn't. I had no idea.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. There's barely anything on there right now, but I think you'll like it.
I'm mainly just excited to go to the website. That's the same name as the Instagram name.
The website has less fun branding.
It's okay. It's the thought that counts.
It's because I had to make that in WordPress, which I don't want to pay a lot of money, because I use Wix for Newton's Darkroom website, and I really like how that looks, but it's also way more expensive than WordPress. So yeah. Anyway, I'm figuring that out.
We'll have a whole nother episode on website designs, because that's obviously something that's hip right now.
Oh yeah,
just making your own website.
Wherever you're at, whatever screen you're looking at, just type in talons.space and you'll find me.
You'll find it. And of course, I'll also have links to everything in the description, so you can find them. Talon, thank you so much for joining this episode.
Of course,
and thank you
it was
all
a pleasure.
so much for watching. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. So long.